March 19, 1942, Krupp Steel Works, Essen, Germany. Fritz Todt knelt beside the blueprint spread across the oak table. His callous finger traced the outline of a 1,000-ton land vehicle. The dim factory lights glinted off the smudges of machine oil on his uniform. This was no ordinary tank design. It was Hitler's latest obsession, a mobile fortress to turn the tide of the war. Todt's jaw tightened. He knew the project bordered on madness. Yet the Führer's order had come down. Build the Rat, or face the consequences. The room reeked of coal dust and ambition. Engineers huddled nearby, their faces a mix of awe and dread. The blueprint depicted a machine like no other, a hull longer than a railway car, turrets big enough to house battleship guns, tracks wide enough to crush concrete bunkers. It was a weapon born of desperation. By 1942, Germany's blitzkrieg had stalled on the Eastern Front. The Soviet T-34 tanks outmatched the Panzer IVs. Stalingrad loomed as a death trap for German troops. Hitler craved a superweapon, something so terrifying, so unstoppable, that would shatter Allied morale and reverse the war's momentum. The Rat was to be that weapon. Todt stood and walked a window. Outside, the Krupp factories roared day and night. Furnaces glowed red, casting an otherworldly hue over the snow-dusted streets. Workers streamed in and out, their shoulders hunched against the cold. This was the heart of Germany's war machine. Krupp had built cannons for Bismarck. It had forged armor for the Tiger tanks. Now it was being tasked with something beyond the limits of conventional engineering. Todt rubbed his eyes. He had spent decades building Germany's infrastructure. Roads, bridges, fortifications. This was different. The Rat wasn't just a machine. It was a fantasy made flesh, one that could bleed Germany's already strained resources dry. The origins of the Rat trace back to a curious proposal from a mid-level army engineer. Major General Erich von Manstein had submitted a memo in late 1941. He called for a land battleship capable of breaking through Soviet defensive lines, something that could withstand anti-tank fire, carry heavy artillery, and act as a mobile command center. Hitler had seized on the idea. To him, size equated to power. A 1,000-ton tank would not just fight, it would intimidate. It would become a symbol of Nazi might. By February 1942, the project had been officially greenlit. Krupp was given primary responsibility for design and construction. Todt, as Minister of Armaments and Munitions, was put in charge of overseeing the entire effort. The technical challenges were staggering. First, there was the issue of weight. A 1,000-ton vehicle would sink into most roads and bridges. The solution the engineers proposed was a set of massive tracks. Each track would be 3.6 meters wide, with reinforced steel plates and rubber padding to distribute the load. Even then, the Rat would be limited to specific routes, hardened highways, railway corridors, and specially constructed causeways. Second, there was the propulsion system. The tank would need an engine powerful enough to move its bulk. Krupp's initial plan called for two Daimler-Benz MB501 diesel engines. Each produced 2,000 horsepower. Together, they could push the Rat to a top speed of 20 kilometers per hour. It wasn't fast, but it was enough, Hitler insisted, for a vehicle designed to crush resistance rather than outmaneuver it. Armament was a third and most critical challenge. Hitler demanded the Rat carry the largest possible guns. Krupp's engineers settled on two 280mm SKC-34 naval cannons. These were the same weapons used on the Scharnhorst-class battleships. Each could fire a 330-kilogram shell over 30 kilometers. For close defense, the tank would also be equipped with 8 20mm flak 38 anti-aircraft guns and multiple 7.92mm machine guns. The turret housing the main cannons would weigh 150 tons alone. It would rotate slowly, just 2 revolutions per minute, but it would pack a punch that no Allied tank could withstand. Armor was another priority. The Ratte's hull would be covered in 200mm thick steel plates. The turret would have even more protection, up to 300mm. This was more than enough to deflect any anti-tank weapon in the Allied arsenal. The Soviet 122mm guns, the British 17-pounder, the American 76mm cannons, all would bounce off the Ratte's armor like pebbles. Or so the engineers claimed. There was a downside, of course. The thicker armor added even more weight. It also limited the tank's internal space. The crew complement was set at 20 men. They would be crammed into a series of compartments: engine room, ammunition storage, command center, and gun stations. Conditions would be miserable. Temperatures would soar in the summer. Ventilation would be poor. But for Hitler, these were trivial concerns. Victory was all that mattered. By April 1942, the design team had produced a detailed blueprint. The Ratte would measure 35 meters long, 14 meters wide, and 11 meters tall. It would have a fuel capacity of 8,000 liters, giving a range of 150 kilometers. The ammunition storage would hold 60 rounds for the main cannons and 10,000 rounds for the secondary weapons. The tank would even feature a small hangar at the rear. It could carry 2 Fieseler Fi-156 storage reconnaissance planes. These would be launched via catapult to scout ahead and spot targets for the main guns. It was a bold, even absurd, concept. But in the fevered atmosphere of Nazi Germany in 1942, absurdity was no barrier to progress. Construction began in secret at Krupp's Essen facility. The first step was forging the hull plates. The steel had to be of the highest quality, strong enough to withstand direct hits from battleship shells. Krupp's furnaces worked around the clock. Workers melted down scrap metal from damaged tanks and warships. They added nickel and chromium to create a hardened alloy. The plates were then rolled into shape using massive presses. Each plate weighed up to 10 tons. Moving them required cranes capable of lifting twice that weight. These cranes were in short supply. Many had been diverted to other projects, building U-boats, repairing bomb factories, constructing coastal defenses. Todt had to pull strings to get the equipment he needed. It was a sign of things to come. The Ratte was already competing with critical war efforts for resources. The engine assembly proved equally difficult. The Daimler-Benz MB501 was a powerful engine, but it was also complex. It required precision machining and high-quality parts. Germany's aluminum supply was dwindling. Much of it was being used to build aircraft. The engineers had to substitute steel for some components. This added weight and reduced efficiency. By June 1942, the first 2 engines were delivered to Krupp. They were installed in a test rig. The initial run was a disaster. One engine overheated and seized up. The other developed a leak in the fuel system. Repairs took weeks. When the engines finally ran smoothly, they consumed fuel at an alarming rate. The Ratte would burn 53 liters of diesel per kilometer. At a time when Germany was struggling to import oil from Romania, this was a crippling cost. The turret construction was the most ambitious part of the project. The 280mm cannons had to be modified for land use. naval cannons were designed to fire from stable platforms. On a moving tank, recoil would be a major problem. The engineers added a hydraulic recoil system. It absorbed the shock of firing, preventing the turret from jolting the entire vehicle. The turret ring, the mechanism that allowed the turret to rotate, was another challenge. It had to be strong enough to support 150 tons. Krupp's machinists spent months grinding and polishing the ring to ensure a smooth rotation. By August 1942, the turret was ready for testing. It was mounted on a concrete platform. The first test firing was held on a rainy morning. The blasts from the cannons shook the ground for kilometers around. Windows in nearby factories shattered. Birds fell from the sky. The engineers cheered. They had proven the turret worked. But Todt watched in silence. He knew the Ratte's firepower came at a terrible cost. As construction progressed, doubts began to surface. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel sent a memo to Hitler in September 1942. He argued that the Ratte was a waste of resources. The Eastern Front needs more panzers, not a single supertank, he wrote. The Ratte will be slow, vulnerable to air attack, and impossible to supply. It will be a liability, not an asset. Hitler dismissed the criticism. He saw Rommel as a defeatist. The Führer was convinced the Ratte would be a game-changer. He ordered Todt to accelerate the project. The first prototype was to be completed by March 1943. The logistics of supplying the Ratte were a nightmare. A single tank would require a convoy of 20 trucks to carry fuel and ammunition. It would need a team of mechanics to maintain it. It would be dependent on railways for long-distance transport. The Ratte was too big to fit through most railway tunnels. Special flat cars had to be built to carry it. These flat cars were in limited supply. They also required reinforced tracks and bridges. The German railway system was already strained by the war effort. Adding the Ratte to the mix would only make things worse. Air defense was another critical flaw. The Ratte's anti-aircraft guns were designed to fend off low-flying attack planes, but they would be useless against high-altitude bombers. The tank's large size made it an easy target. A single bomb from AB-17 Flying Fortress could disable it. The engineers proposed adding smoke launchers to hide the Ratte from aerial surveillance. But smoke would also blind the tank's crew. It was a compromise that solved nothing. By December 1942, the Ratte prototype was 40% complete. The hull was finished. The engines were installed. The turret was partially assembled. But the project was already behind schedule. Resources were drying up. The Battle of Stalingrad was turning into a disaster. The German Sixth Army was surrounded. Hitler ordered more tanks and artillery to be sent to the Eastern Front. The Ratte's priority was downgraded. Krupp's workers were diverted to build Panzer V Panthers and Tiger I tanks. The Ratte's construction slowed to a crawl. Todt was under increasing pressure. He traveled to the Eastern Front in January 1943. He saw the devastation firsthand. Wrecked tanks littered the snow. Soldiers huddled in frozen trenches. The Soviets were advancing. Germany's situation was desperate. Todt returned to Berlin and begged Hitler to cancel the Ratte. "We need every ton of steel, every liter of fuel, every worker for the war effort," he pleaded. "The Ratte is a luxury we can't afford." Hitler refused. "The Ratte will be our salvation," he insisted. "It will break the Soviet lines. It will make the Allies tremble. We will not abandon it." The final straw came in February 1943. The Sixth Army surrendered at Stalingrad. Over 90,000 German soldiers were taken prisoner. Germany's military prestige was shattered. Resources became even scarcer. The Luftwaffe was losing control of the skies. Allied bombers were attacking German factories with increasing frequency. Krupp's Essen facility was hit twice in March 1943. The Ratte's prototype was damaged. Several hull plates were destroyed. The turret was knocked off its mounting. Repairs would take months. Todt seized the opportunity. He ordered the project suspended. He claimed the damage was too severe to fix. Hitler was furious, but with the war going badly, he had no choice but to agree. The Ratte was put on hold indefinitely. The prototype sat in a corner of the Krupp factory for the rest of the war. It became a curiosity. Workers would sneak over to look at it during their breaks. Some called it Hitler's folly. Others saw it as a symbol of Germany's lost ambition. As the war neared its end, the Allies closed in on Essen. The German High Command ordered the Ratte destroyed. They didn't want it falling into enemy hands. Demolition teams arrived in April 1945. They planted explosives around the prototype. The blast was enormous. The hull was torn apart. The turret was flipped onto its side. The Ratte was reduced to a pile of twisted metal. When Allied troops entered Essen in April 1945, they found the remains of the Ratte. They were astonished by its size. Photographs were taken. Reports were sent back to Washington and London. The Allies couldn't believe the Germans had wasted so many resources on such an impractical weapon. The Ratte became a cautionary tale, example of how hubris and desperation could lead to catastrophic engineering decisions. In the years after the war, the Ratte was largely forgotten. The ruins of the prototype were scrapped. The blueprints were seized by the Allies and classified. Some were later declassified and published. They revealed the full extent of the project's absurdity. The Ratte would have been a death trap. It would have been slow, vulnerable, and impossible to supply. It would have contributed nothing to Germany's war effort. It was a product of Hitler's megalomania, a weapon designed to satisfy his ego rather than win a war. Yet the Ratte also represented something else. It was a testament to the ingenuity of German engineers. Despite the project's flaws, they had come close to building a machine that defied conventional wisdom. They had solved technical problems that many experts thought impossible. The Ratte's tracks, engines, and turret were feats of engineering, even if they were put to a misguided purpose. The legacy of the Ratte lives on in military engineering circles. It serves as a reminder of the dangers of prioritizing size and firepower over practicality. Modern tanks are designed to be fast, agile, and reliable. They are built in large numbers, not as one-off superweapons. The Ratte's failure taught military planners that quantity often matters more than quality. It also taught them that logistics are just as important as firepower. A weapon is only useful if it can be supplied and maintained. The Ratte also offers a window into the mindset of Nazi Germany in the final years of the war. By 1942, Hitler and his top advisors were grasping at straws. They knew the war was turning against them. They hoped the superweapon would turn the tide. The Ratte was one of several such projects. Others included the V-1 flying bomb, the V-2 rocket, and the Me-262 jet fighter. Some of these weapons were effective. The V-2 was a terrifying innovation. The Me-262 was a superior fighter, but none were enough to save Germany. The Ratte, if it had been completed, would have been just another failed superweapon. Today, the Ratte exists only in archives and memories. A few scale models have been built. Documentaries have been made about it. It has become a cult curiosity, something that seems more like science fiction than history. But for those who worked on it, the Ratte was a source of frustration and regret. Fritz Todt died in a plane crash in February 1944. He never lived to see the end of the war, but he had already come to terms with the rat's failure. In a private diary entry written shortly before his death, he wrote, "The rat was a mistake. It was a dream of power that blinded us to reality. War is not won by giant machines. It is won by discipline, logistics, and the will to fight. We forgot that, and for that, we will pay a terrible price." The price was indeed terrible. Germany was defeated. Its cities were in ruins. Its people were starving. The rat's twisted remains were a fitting symbol of the Nazi regime's collapse. It was a monster born of fear and ambition, a monster that never got the chance to roar. But its story remains a warning. In war, as in life, bigger is not always better. Sometimes, the most dangerous weapons are the ones that exist only in our imaginations. As the years pass, the rat fades further into history, but its lessons endure. It reminds us that engineering genius without practical judgment is useless. It reminds us that resources must be used wisely in times of crisis. It reminds us that hubris is the greatest enemy of any nation. The rat was more than a tank. It was a metaphor for the Nazi regime itself, bloated, inefficient, and ultimately self-destructive. In the end, the rat's greatest contribution to history was not as a weapon. It was as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most powerful nations can be undone by their own fantasies. The rat may have never seen combat, but it still has something to teach us. And that is a legacy that will outlive any machine.